Boom. The moment the Qi Si shattered, Mu Chen's body was struck as if by a thunderbolt and began trembling violently at a subtle frequency. Cold sweat instantly beaded on his forehead, trickling down his face. An indescribable, excruciating pain spread throughout his body, almost robbing him of his sanity. Fortunately, Mu Chen had anticipated this. He quickly took a deep breath and calmed his mind, realizing that along with the explosion of his Qi Si, the vast spiritual energy that had been stored within it was now rushing out like a wild, untamed horse. With the Qi Si no longer restraining it, this energy, cultivated by Mu Chen himself, was slipping out of his control. The energy rampaged within him. If it couldn't be contained, it would likely tear apart his meridians, leading to disastrous consequences. Clearly, such a scenario was one Mu Chen absolutely could not allow. "Come back to me." A stern shout suddenly echoed in Mu Chen's mind. From the site where his Qi Si had exploded, a tiny speck of light flickered. The speck was so small it could almost be ignored, but it radiated a powerful pulling force. Whoosh, whoosh. The force rapidly expanded, enveloping every corner of Mu Chen's body. The unruly spiritual energy began to slow down, eventually rushing toward the direction of the tiny light. Hiss, hiss. The tiny light was, of course, the supreme Si Mu Chen had previously created. It flickered faintly, refusing nothing, and like an endless abyss, it began to absorb all the spiritual energy that was pouring toward it. After an entire hour, the rampaging spiritual energy in Mu Chen's body had completely disappeared. The tiny light that was the supreme Si now floated inside him, its glow brighter than before. Mu Chen's mind stirred. He entered the supreme Si, and immediately, an endless, vast ocean appeared before his eyes. Within it, spiritual energy surged, but this scale was nowhere near what he had experienced when using the great Xun'er demon pillar's power. Mu Chen, with his eyes closed, suddenly opened them. Nine Nether, who had been watching him the whole time, let out a sigh of relief. She knew Mu Chen had successfully completed the Qi Si shattering step, and now the Supreme Si had fully replaced it. What Mu Chen needed to do next was to nurture the Supreme Si with spiritual energy until it reached a full state. This would take quite a bit of time, as this step was the most crucial when advancing from the triple divine soul tribulation to the supreme stage. Only when the Supreme Si was perfected would there be enough foundation for future cultivation of the Supreme Dharmakaya. If you can refine and absorb this supreme pill you obtained in the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition, you should be able to step into the supreme stage. It'll save you a lot of time, Nine Nether suggested. Mu Chen hesitated for a moment before shaking his head and softly saying, "I plan to perfect the Supreme Si on my own." Nine Nether was stunned, then frowned. "You don't intend to refine the supreme pill or supreme spiritual liquid? In that case, you'll need a considerable amount of time. To bring the Supreme Si to its full state required an immense amount of spiritual energy. If relying solely on self-cultivation, it would take an enormous amount of time. That's why most people would choose to refine the supreme spiritual liquid at this stage to speed up the process. I have plenty of time right now. The Supreme Si is the foundation of the supreme stage. I believe this power is best perfected through my own cultivation." Mu Chen smiled. Nine Nether didn't refute him this time. Instead, she looked at him strangely before breaking into a gentle smile. "I didn't expect you to have such insight." Her voice contained rare praise, for she understood that Mu Chen's choice was surprising. Many people, when breaking through to the supreme stage, would rush to refine the supreme spiritual liquid to experience the true power of a supreme powerhouse. While that wouldn't cause any adverse effects, the power it provided would never match the energy refined through one's own cultivation. The Supreme Si was the foundation of the supreme stage, and its importance couldn't be overstated. Mu Chen had temporarily resisted the allure of that power, choosing the most fundamental and steady method instead. This decision was no easy feat. "Because I have big ambitions." Mu Chen looked up, gazing at the sky shrouded in spiritual mist, murmuring, "I know, a peerless powerhouse." Nine Nether's lips curled into a slight smile as she stared at the young man before her. "But this path won't be easy. There are more geniuses in the great thousand worlds than you can imagine. You'll realize that once you step into the world, no matter how difficult it is, I have to push forward. Chen flashed Nine Nether a radiant smile. Looking at his smile, Nine Nether was slightly taken aback, then she smiled as well. The young man before her had indeed matured a lot compared to when they first met. Looks like I'll be relying on you again for a while. Chen flashed a smile at Nine Nether. Then, without waiting for her response, he closed his eyes and quickly entered a meditative state. How infuriating. Does he really think I'm his bodyguard? Nine Nether gritted her silver teeth, shaking her small fist angrily at Chen. But in the end, she could only cast him a resentful glance before sitting down near him in a cross-legged position. As Chen entered his cultivation state, a powerful suction force suddenly surged from his body. The dense spiritual mist in the air immediately began to boil, then howled down like a storm, completely engulfing Chen's form. The vast spiritual energy poured into Chen's body in an unceasing flow. After being refined, it all rushed into the Supreme Sea. Facing such a constant influx, the Supreme Sea seemed like an endless abyss, devouring everything without hesitation. However, at this moment, Chen finally began to understand why Nine Nether had said that relying on one's own cultivation to fill the Supreme Sea would take an extremely long time. He realized that after a whole day of cultivation, his Supreme Sea hadn't shown any noticeable increase. Clearly, the spiritual energy he refined in a single day was hardly anything to the Supreme Sea. At this rate, Chen estimated that it would take at least 3 months to reach the first saturation of the Supreme Sea. This refining efficiency is too slow. Chen muttered to himself, falling into deep thought. After a while, his mind suddenly shifted, and his hands quickly formed a seal. On the lotus platform, Chen's body was completely hidden by the thick spiritual mist. Across the world, torrents of spiritual mist, converging into great waves, surged toward him. It was at this moment that the spiritual energy in the world suddenly fluctuated violently. Nine Nether, not far away, also sensed it. She quickly looked up, her beautiful eyes narrowing. Before her, a massive black light tower suddenly materialized around Chen's body. The moment the tower appeared, it unleashed a terrifying suction force. Spiritual mist in a 10,000 zhang radius surged toward it. From afar, it looked like giant spiritual mist dragons, all diving into the light tower. Roar! As the spiritual mist dragons poured in, the ancient golden dragon carvings on the surface of the black light tower suddenly came to life. The dragon's roar echoed across the sky before transforming into golden flames that surged into the tower. Sizzle! As the vast spiritual mist dragons encountered the golden flames, they were rapidly vaporized. Soon, the inside of the tower seemed to shimmer with tiny droplets, which then descended directly into Chen's body, sitting cross-legged within the tower. These tiny droplets, though far less potent than the supreme spiritual liquid, still contained extremely refined spiritual energy. Absorbing them was much easier and purer than before. What a domineering flame! Nine Nether gazed in surprise at the golden flames. She herself was no stranger to fire, having once possessed the 9 Nether flames, and now wielding the even more powerful undying fire. However, this golden flame before her didn't seem like an ordinary substance. After activating the pagoda, Chen's refining speed surged to an almost terrifying level. The intense spiritual energy fluctuations could even be faintly sensed by the elders in the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Over the following time, Chen became fully immersed in his cultivation. Almost instinctively, he absorbed and refined the spiritual energy, blocking out any external disturbances. And this focus lasted for an entire month. During this month, he never stopped. The vast spiritual energy was refined and absorbed continuously, and the commotion grew more and more intense. Eventually, not only the elders of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy could sense it, but even many of the students noticed the violent spiritual energy fluctuations coming from the back mountains. Fortunately, Headmaster Grand Song had already issued an order, so everyone knew Chen was cultivating in the back mountains, and no one disturbed him, though they couldn't help but marvel. And so, a month passed by in the blink of an eye. Nine Nether, who had been pretending to rest with her eyes closed, suddenly opened her beautiful eyes. Her gaze shifted abruptly to the cultivation platform, where the black light tower began to fluctuate and slowly dissipate. As the black light tower faded, a figure appeared, sitting cross-legged in midair. Within a 100-meter radius around this figure, the space seemed to become empty, as if an invisible protective barrier had formed. Not even the surrounding spiritual energy could enter. The figure sat quietly in the void, with no fluctuations of spiritual energy around him, but there was an almost imperceptible sense of oppressive power radiating from him. Chen, as solid as a rock, finally felt his eyes tremble slightly. Then, the eyes that had been closed for a month slowly opened. Boom! A brilliant light surged in his black pupils, distorting the space in front of him. In an instant, he moved, appearing in the sky like a ghost. Then, he slowly spread his hands and let out a long, fierce howl. Boom! The howl was like thunder, and a gigantic column of spiritual energy, thousands of meters tall, erupted from his body. The column connected the heavens and earth, and an invisible pressure spread across the surroundings. Within the Northern Song Spiritual Academy, countless students looked on in shock at the enormous light column. From within it, they could sense a familiar oppressive force. That oppressive force belonged to a supreme powerhouse. At this moment, Chen had successfully stepped into the supreme stage. The massive light column shot into the sky, visible for hundreds of miles. Everyone could feel the overwhelming pressure radiating from it, a sensation they had only felt from the elders who had stepped into the supreme stage within the academy. Clearly, the owner of this light column had also successfully advanced to the supreme stage. On a mountain peak in the Northern Song Spiritual Academy, Shun Songxing and Li Xiantong looked up, their expressions filled with mixed emotions as they gazed at the direction of the light column. This guy really is a freak, Shun Songxing sighed bitterly, a hint of admiration and unwillingness in his eyes. When he first met Chen, the latter was still being hunted by Mo Xingtian. Yet, in just 3 years, that young man had far surpassed him and, ahead of him, had reached the supreme stage first. Li Xiantong nodded in agreement. His feelings were even stronger than Shun Songxing's. After all, when they first encountered Chen, he had to give everything just to last 3 rounds against him. At that time, Li Xiantong never thought Chen's ordinary background could ever match the excellence of Luo Li. However, in less than 3 years, they had watched Chen soar and shine. Now, even Li Xiantong had to admit that Luo Li's judgment was indeed correct. Though Luo Tianxian seemed dissatisfied when Luo Li left, having witnessed Chen's meteoric rise, Li Xiantong knew that one day, Luo Tianxian would have to change his view of Chen, just like he had. This young man was always able to create miracles that left people speechless. Chen probably won't stay at the Northern Song Spiritual Academy for much longer, Shun Songxing suddenly remarked. His voice carried a sense of reluctance. After all this time, he had grown quite fond of Chen. And you? Li Xiantong turned to Shun Songxing. He knew that this man, too, had an indomitable spirit. The Northern Song Spiritual Academy could never trap him forever. I'll begin my closed-door training soon, striving to enter the supreme stage as quickly as possible. After that, I'll venture into the great thousand worlds. Haha, maybe I'll meet Chen then. If there's a chance, I'd love to spar with him and see who is stronger by that time. Shun Songxing smiled, his eyes burning with fierce battle intent and anticipation. Then let's do it together. I think my pace in reaching the supreme stage might even surpass yours, Li Xiantong said, a smile forming on his handsome face. Haha, think you can surpass me? It's not that simple. Do you think you're Chen? Shun Songxing laughed heartily. We'll see about that. Li Xiantong smiled gently. His gaze was warm, truly seeing Shun Songxing as a rival to push himself against. As for Chen, that guy was simply a monster, so he decided to leave him out of the equation. In front of the main hall of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, Bei Ming Longkuan, the headmaster of the Great Song Academy, and Mou, the hall master of the Mou Palace, were also gazing up at the towering pillar of light. Their expressions were filled with a sense of satisfaction. The achievements Chen had made over the past 2 or 3 years were extremely rare in the history of their Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. This kid is truly impressive. If he could stay with our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, how wonderful would that be? Hall Master Mou couldn't help but sigh. Short-sighted, hindering someone's future. However, Bei Ming Long Kuan immediately scolded Hall Master Mou, his face darkening with displeasure. Hall Master Mou, upon being scolded, immediately became embarrassed and sheepishly said, "I was just making a casual remark." Headmaster of the Great Song Academy couldn't help but smile at the situation. His gaze turned slightly profound as he spoke. Mu Chen's potential is immense, but we in the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy cannot fully cultivate him. Only the vast Great Thousand Worlds is truly his stage. So, if he stays in our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, while his strength will certainly improve, he will never become a true powerhouse. Mou, do you believe that when Mu Chun returns here in the future, not only us, but even Bei Ming, my old friend, will not be able to compare with him? Mou was taken aback. He clearly hadn't expected Headmaster of the Great Song Academy to think so highly of Mu Chun. On the side, Bei Ming Long Kuan stroked his beard, his aged face calm. But surprisingly, he did not oppose this view. He knew that what Headmaster of the Great Song Academy said was not without reason. This young man indeed possessed terrifying potential, and most importantly, he had the heart of a true cultivator. Determination, persistence, and a firm resolve. For a true powerhouse, talent is secondary. What matters most is that unyielding heart of a cultivator. This young man's future is extraordinary. Sister Lingxi, did Big Brother Mu Chen break through successfully? In the quiet courtyard, Xun'er covered her eyes with her little hand and looked up at the towering light pillar with a face full of excitement. It seems so, Lingxi said, kneeling before the bamboo house. Her white dress, due to her kneeling posture, created a stunning curve, but this scene didn't provide any man with a chance to feast his eyes. Lingxi gracefully held a jade flask, pouring and drinking on her own. She casually glanced at the towering light pillar and nodded indifferently. Sister Lingxi, why aren't you concerned about Big Brother Mu Chun? Xun'er said, pouting slightly, clearly dissatisfied with Lingxi's nonchalant attitude. He has a beautiful woman by his side to protect him, so there's no need for me to worry, Lingxi replied casually. Oh, Xun'er giggled, sitting in front of Lingxi and teasing. So, Sister Lingxi is jealous of that pretty big sister. Is she very beautiful? Lingxi raised an eyebrow, her eyes curving into a dangerous arc. Not as beautiful as you, Sister Lingxi. You're even more beautiful, Xun'er blurted out, but upon seeing Lingxi's brows lift slightly, she quickly changed her tune. Humph. Lingxi gently snorted, then lifted her cool, charming face to gaze at the towering spiritual light pillar. Her silver teeth clenched as she thought to herself. This guy? When he was in closed-door training, she had even taken the initiative to ask if he needed her protection, only to be rejected. What an unforgivable guy. Xun'er secretly peeked at Lingxi, her little head tilted in confusion. Although Sister Lingxi was usually cold to others, she had a good heart. She used to get along very well with Luo Li and the others. Why was she so resistant to that Nine Nether sister? It was said that at the Luo God Society, everyone recognized that both Sister Lingxi and Nine Nether sister were the most popular queen-like figures. Although Xun'er didn't quite understand what a queen-like figure was, while Xun'er's little mind was wandering, Lingxi stood up gracefully. She gazed at the giant light pillar with a proud and content look in her eyes. Truly, he was the son of Aunt Jing. In the future, he would likely be as exceptional as Aunt Jing. If that day really came, Lingxi thought, she would probably find herself unable to resist liking this guy. A massive beam of light that pierced through the heavens and earth lasted for several minutes before gradually dissipating. As the light faded, two streams of light streaked across the sky, and in a blink, they appeared above the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Countless students turned their gazes upwards, and they saw a young man standing midair, still looking the same as before. Even his once mighty spiritual energy fluctuations seemed to have disappeared entirely at this moment. If it weren't for his imposing presence as he stood in the air, many might have thought he had failed to break through. Beside Mu Chun, Nine Nether stood gracefully, drawing even more attention than Mu Chun. Her slender, tall frame was elegant, her white neck resembling a swan's, and beneath it, her delicate collarbones and full curves of her chest were striking. Especially her perfect long legs, which were a feast for the eyes, bringing a sense of tranquility to those who looked upon her. Her narrow, beautiful eyes always carried a wildness that made it clear. Conquering this woman would be an impossible task. Chen glanced at the countless eyes of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy and smiled slightly. He exhaled a relaxed breath, his hand gently curling. He could feel the terrifying spiritual power within him, constantly surging like a volcano. The strength of this power was far beyond the so-called triple divine soul tribulation. At this moment, he felt that with a simple wave of his hand, he could suppress hundreds of experts at the triple divine soul tribulation level. Such a gap could never be bridged by numbers alone. And this was just pure spiritual energy. If Chen successfully cultivated the supreme Dharma body in the future, the power would undoubtedly be even more terrifying. This is truly mesmerizing power. Chen lost himself in it for a moment, before snapping back to his senses and, together with 9 Nether, descending toward the main hall. Chen, congratulations. When Hall Master Mou and the others saw Chen descend, they couldn't help but smile. Chen quickly cupped his hands in respect, then hesitated slightly before looking toward Headmaster Taitsong. If there's something, just say it. Why the formalities? Headmaster Taitsong smiled gently upon seeing Chen's hesitation. Headmaster, I would like to use the Mirror of Judgment from the 5 Great Academies. I wonder if that would be possible. Chen asked, looking nervously at Headmaster Taitsong. This was extremely important to him. If it wasn't allowed, he would likely have difficulty finding the Immortal tome. Chen's request clearly took Headmaster Taitsong and the others by surprise. Their faces slowly grew serious, and their brows furrowed. Seeing this, Chen's heart sank. To borrow the Mirror of Judgment. Before the main hall, after hearing Chen's request, Headmaster Taitsong and the others frowned. After a while, Headmaster Taitsong looked at Chen and said thoughtfully, "The Mirror of Judgment is jointly controlled by the 5 Great Academies. It cannot be used by just one academy alone. To use it, the heads of the 5 Great Academies must vote, and if more than 3 agree, then it can be used." Chen scratched his head and gave a bitter smile. He naturally knew that using the Mirror of Judgment wasn't easy, but right now, it was the only way he could obtain information about the Immortal tome. The Sacred Spirit Academy will most likely not agree. However, the other 3 academies, we might be able to convince. North Abyss Dragon Kuan, who had been silent, spoke slowly. Let me go to the 3 academies. They should give me, an old man, some face. Everyone, including Headmaster Taitsong, was surprised by this. North Abyss Dragon Kuan rarely intervened in the matters of the Spirit Academies, and they hadn't expected him to make an exception for Chen this time. Chen was also stunned for a moment, then turned to look at North Abyss Dragon Kuan with gratitude. Thank you, Senior North Abyss. Although Chen knew how difficult it was for an Earth Supreme like North Abyss Dragon Kuan to intervene, he also knew that North Abyss Dragon Kuan was proud. It was rare for him to actively go out of his way to pull strings. Chen did not reject his help because he understood North Abyss Dragon Kuan's character. If he had refused, the reclusive old man would have likely stopped talking to him. So, Chen just needed to remember this favor. If it weren't for your success in the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition, our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy might have even lost our title as one of the 5 Great Academies. Compared to that, this old man's little favor doesn't mean much. I am also a member of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, whether now or in the future, Chen said with a slight smile. Good. With your words, it's worth me putting aside some face. North Abyss Dragon Kuan's face showed a look of satisfaction. He then waved at the headmaster of Grand Song Academy and the others. I'll head to the 3 Great Academies now. You all stay in the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Chen, wait for my message. As soon as North Abyss Dragon Kuan's words fell, he stepped forward, and the space in front of him suddenly twisted. A spatial rift was torn open, and his figure stepped right into it, vanishing instantly. Chen looked at the decisive and swift North Abyss Dragon Kuan and felt even more grateful in his heart. All right, now you stay in the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy for the time being, Headmaster Tsong said with a smile as he patted Chen's shoulder. After a brief pause, he continued, once this matter is settled, you'll likely leave the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, won't you? Mu Chen nodded slightly. That's fine. Staying in the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy now won't bring you much improvement. The Great Thousand Worlds are more suitable for you, Headmaster Tsang said with a wide grin. But remember what I told you back then. As long as you haven't done anything wrong to the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, you'll always be one of our students. No matter what trouble you get into outside, as long as you return here, we will make sure no one dares to bully you. Mu Chen looked at the headmaster's face, filled with a kind smile, and felt touched. He didn't say much, merely nodding solemnly. This place, he would always remember. After a while, Headmaster Tsang spoke with Mu Chen for a little longer before sending him off. The headmaster then left with 9 Nether and went directly to the quiet courtyard where Lingxi was. When he entered the courtyard, he saw the cold and elegant woman in a white dress, kneeling in front of the bamboo house's tea table. When she noticed him, she gave a slight smile, but her brows subtly raised when she saw 9 Nether following behind Mu Chen. Congratulations, you've finally become a supreme powerhouse, Lingxi said with a smile. Mu Chen also smiled and sat down opposite her. He looked at her clear and cold beauty, hesitating for a moment before speaking. Lingxi, I may be leaving the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy soon. Lingxi's delicate hand, which had been pouring tea, trembled slightly. She glanced at Mu Chen and nodded gently. Lingxi, are you coming with me? Mu Chen asked softly. Lingxi fell silent for a moment before gently shaking her head. After you leave, I will also be leaving the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, but I probably won't be going with you. I have other matters to attend to. Other matters? Mu Chen was taken aback. He looked at Lingxi, who was gently biting her red lip, and furrowed his brows. Are you planning to look for my mother? Lingxi nodded slightly, her face slightly cold. Many of my memories were sealed, but I can still faintly sense some remnants. So, I plan to investigate alone. Regardless, we need to know where Aunt Jing is. No, it's too dangerous for you to go alone. If you're going, I'm coming with you. Mu Chen's expression changed slightly, and he spoke sternly. Though he had never encountered that mysterious clan, he could sense its terrifying power. His mother's strength was already on par with the Heavenly Supreme, yet she had still been trapped. Meanwhile, Lingxi only had the strength of a 4th-grade Supreme. If she were to be discovered by that mysterious clan, the consequences would be dire. Stop saying foolish things, Lingxi smiled softly. Aunt Jing would rather endure the pain of missing you to protect you. How could I let you follow me into danger? Besides, you don't need to worry about me. I know what I'm doing. I won't act recklessly. I'll investigate quietly, and once I have news, I'll come find you. After all, you'll eventually be searching for Aunt Jing too. You can't just go blindly, right? So, I'll go ahead and gather some useful information for you. Mu Chen looked at Lingxi, whose cold face held an uncommon tenderness. She had a faint smile by her lips, and her soft tone carried an unwavering determination. After a moment of eye contact, Lingxi gently shook her head, signaling Mu Chen not to argue further. After a while, Mu Chen finally gave in with a heavy sigh, then gritted his teeth and said, Then you must make a divine soul seal for me. The so-called divine soul seal involves separating a strand of the divine soul and crafting it into a seal. This seal is connected to its owner, and whenever the owner is in danger, the seal will respond. However, since this seal contains a fragment of the divine soul, if the seal is destroyed, its owner will suffer some harm. For this reason, unless one shares an extremely close bond, most people are unwilling to entrust their divine soul seal to others. But it was clear that the relationship between Mu Chen and Lingxi was far from ordinary. Lingxi looked into Mu Chen's determined eyes and, after a moment of hesitation, finally relented. A helpless yet affectionate smile appeared on her lips. You're such a stubborn little thing. Fine. She extended her jade-like hand, her slender fingers gathering light. A final flash of golden light blinked, and slowly, a golden seal the size of a palm materialized. The seal was exquisitely small, and it resembled a miniature version of Lingxi herself, even down to her cool and aloof aura. Here you go. Lingxi smiled sweetly at Mu Chen, handing over the divine soul golden seal. Mu Chen took the golden seal and curiously toyed with it in his hands. He lightly traced the little Lingxi with his fingers. Almost immediately, He saw Ling Shi's face flush red, her gaze turning sharp as she glared at him. After all, there was still a faint link between her and the divine soul golden seal. Mu Chen's touch, combined with their close proximity, had made her feel it. His playful gesture was essentially teasing her in front of her. If anyone else had dared to behave this way, Ling Shi would have likely already used her spirit array to obliterate them into dust. Ahem. Mu Chen cleared his throat awkwardly, hurriedly putting the golden seal away. With a serious expression, he said, Ling Shi, no matter what, you have to promise me not to act recklessly. I will take care of these matters in the future. When the time comes, whether it's mother or you, I will protect you both. You'll talk like this once you surpass me, Ling Shi said with a smile that outshone 100 flowers. Still, Mu Chen's words filled her heart with warmth. By the way, now that you've advanced to the supreme stage, don't neglect your training in spirit arrays. With your talent, you'll likely touch upon the mysteries of becoming a spirit array master soon. That would be an incredibly powerful skill. In this vast world, dangers are everywhere, far beyond what the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy can handle. Having one more method of defense will always be a good thing. Ling Shi's face became more serious as she looked at Mu Chen, offering her advice. Seeing Ling Shi suddenly become so maternal, Mu Chen smiled and nodded, warmth filling his heart. Also, Ling Shi's beautiful eyes subtly turned toward the 9 nether sparrow, who had been standing quietly nearby, her expression flat and emotionless. She hadn't approached or spoken to Ling Shi. For some reason, it seemed like the two women were never quite on the same wavelength. This bloodline bond, it's not impossible to break, Ling Shi said, her tone casual. Upon hearing this, 9 nether's brow furrowed, and she coldly glared at Ling Shi. Ling Shi, however, did not back down. She calmly responded, Don't look at me like that. Mu Chen is young and naive, so of course, he doesn't know. Do you think I'm completely unaware? What do you want to say? 9 nether's voice was cold as ice. You managed to evolve at this age and possess the undying fire. I assume your position in the 9 nether sparrow clan is quite significant, yes? Ling Shi sneered. What if it is? 9 nether lifted her sharp chin. The 9 nether sparrow clan is notoriously stubborn and inflexible. If they find out you formed a bloodline bond with a human, they will surely be enraged. They might even force Mu Chen to sever the bond. That's in line with your clan's nature, and if that happens, Mu Chen will suffer unimaginable consequences. Ling Shi's eyes were cold as she stared at 9 nether. No one can force us to sever our bloodline bond. 9 nether glared at Ling Shi, emphasizing each word. No. One. Can't. The two women locked eyes, their gazes as cold as ice, and the atmosphere between them grew thick with tension. The tension in the air spread throughout the courtyard, as the two women's cold stares filled the space with an overwhelming aura. The wind picked up violently, causing the leaves in the courtyard to swirl wildly. Mu Chen looked at the scene before him, feeling a bit of a headache. He still couldn't understand why the two women in front of him always acted like they were about to go to war every time they met, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Anyone can say sweet words. But if I find out that you, Mu Chen, have been harmed because of this bloodline bond, even if you are from the 9 nether sparrow clan, I will not let you off, Ling Shi said, her beautiful eyes fixed on the 9 nether, her voice cold. Bold words. I'd like to see what you can do to back them up. 9 nether's slender brows arched, her cold laughter ringing out. Is that so? Ling Shi's face was icy, and her long jade-like hands suddenly flickered with the brilliance of 1,000 stars. Humph. 9 nether snorted coldly, her eyes flashing with a cold light. Behind her, a massive shadow that seemed to cover the heavens and earth began to appear, its overwhelming presence enough to intimidate anyone. Stop it, both of you. Just as the two women seemed on the verge of fighting, Mu Chen couldn't hold back any longer and shouted angrily. His hand grabbed Ling Shi's jade-like hand, and on his handsome face, true anger finally surged. Are you done causing trouble? Ling Shi and 9 nether turned to look at him, but this time, Mu Chen didn't interrupt them. The anger on his face was genuine, and his previously gentle eyes were now unusually stern. It was the first time Ling Shi and 9 nether had seen Mu Chen truly angry in front of them. For a moment, their imposing auras weakened, and they both let out a light snort. withdrawing their spiritual energy fluctuations. Mu Chen glanced at the two women, who turned their faces away from him, and rubbed his forehead. Ling Shi, the bloodline bond between me and Nine Nether was forged during a time of mutual danger. So even if there is a way to break it, I won't. Over the years, Nine Nether has helped me a lot. If not for her, I might not have made it this far. No matter what danger this bond might bring me in the future, I will bear it. As long as Nine Nether doesn't agree, I won't let anyone break our bloodline connection. Mu Chen's voice resonated clearly in the courtyard. It wasn't soft, but it carried a sense of stubbornness and determination that was hard to ignore. The coldness on Ling Shi and Nine Nether's faces seemed to ease, though it was unclear when. Nine Nether's beautiful eyes shifted, and she glanced at Mu Chen's serious, determined face before turning away. For some reason, her mood lightened considerably. Ling Shi stared at Mu Chen for a while before finally sighing lightly. Since you've said it like that, I won't say anything more. She smiled mischievously, fixing her eyes on Mu Chen. I didn't expect little Mu Chen to be so responsible. What a real man. Mu Chen gritted his teeth. I'm not that young. You're only 2 or 3 years older than me. Ling Shi smiled knowingly, then looked up at Nine Nether. Her voice softened. I'm not aiming this at you, but you must understand that what I said is indeed a hidden peril. Once the Nine Nether Sparrow clan finds out, they won't let it go easily. I'm an adult. This is my business, and even my parents can't dictate anything. If trouble arises, I will protect him, Nine Nether said indifferently. Mu Chen couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. I'm not interested in living off a woman. But Nine Nether ignored his protest and left with a casual remark. You two take your time, before striding away with her alluring long legs, leaving behind a graceful silhouette. Such a proud girl. Ling Shi smiled, watching Nine Nether's figure. Mu Chen, it seems the road to tame this proud little sparrow will be long and challenging. Mu Chen could only sigh in helplessness. Whenever you have time, come to me. Don't neglect your spirit array training. Before you leave, I'll teach you everything I can. Ling Shi said lazily, stretching her jade-like arm, the fullness of her figure becoming even more evident beneath her white dress. All right, Mu Chen nodded, smiling. In the following days, Mu Chen quietly stayed at the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Most of the time, he was in the Spirit Hall with Ling Shi, discussing spirit array techniques. When their training ended, he would join the others in the Luo God Society for a bit of fun. Back when he was at the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, he spent most of his time training. He enjoyed the smiles at the Luo God Society, where everyone's expressions were free from any hidden agendas. Here, they could forget about their so-called identities because, at this moment, they were all members of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Such smiles, perhaps, would be hard to see again once they ventured into the Great Thousand Worlds. After all, that place would no longer be the carefree ivory tower. Every nightfall, Mu Chen would sit alone on a mountaintop, gazing up at the starry sky. In the past, a young girl would sit quietly beside him, her small head gently resting on his shoulder. The feeling of her dependence was something Mu Chen deeply cherished because, back then, he felt as though he was her entire world, supporting her. But now, the girl was no longer by his side, and that feeling could only exist in his memories. Mu Chen slowly lay on the grass, his eyes gently closing, and his palm clenched tightly. Luo Li, wait for me. After Mu Chen had stayed quietly at the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy for about 10 days, he finally nervously awaited the return of the North Abyss Dragon Kun. As soon as he heard that the North Abyss Dragon Kun had returned, Mu Chen rushed to the main hall, where he saw the North Abyss Dragon Kun, whose elderly face was adorned with a slight smile. Upon seeing that smile, Mu Chen immediately let out a breath of relief. The old fool, Tian Sheng from the Sacred Spirit Academy, didn't agree, but thankfully, the other 3 academy heads did, so he couldn't say anything. The North Abyss Dragon Kun glanced at Mu Chen, smiling warmly. At that moment, even with Mu Chen's composure, a surge of excitement rose in his heart. When do you want to use the Mirror of Judgment? Can we do it now? Mu Chen asked, eager. Let's do it now then. The North Abyss Dragon Kun wasn't surprised by Mu Chen's impatience. With a smile and a wave of his hand, a spatial rift appeared before them, and he stepped through it. Follow me. Mu Chen nodded and immediately followed. Behind him, The 9 nether sparrow followed as well. As Chen stepped into the spatial rift, the scene before him instantly changed. It seemed to be a small space, not large, just a chaos of swirling energy. In the middle of this small space, an ancient bronze mirror, thousands of feet in size, quietly floated. A terrifying and indescribable aura rippled out, causing the space to tremble. In the space, a stone staircase extended out, leading up to the ancient bronze mirror. The North Abyss Dragon Kuan led Chen and the 9 nether sparrow there, and handed Chen a bronze seal. Activate this, and you'll be able to use the Mirror of Judgment. However, you cannot use it for attacking, as such a powerful artifact is beyond your control right now. Using it recklessly could lead to backlash. Chen took the bronze seal and nodded. I'll step outside first. The North Abyss Dragon Kuan smiled, and, with a flicker, vanished into thin air. He wasn't overly curious about why Chen wanted to use the Mirror of Judgment, but refrained from asking. After all, everyone had their own secrets. As the North Abyss Dragon Kuan left, the space became quiet. Chen looked up at the massive Mirror of Judgment, holding the bronze seal in his hand and channeling his spiritual energy into it. A faint glow shot from his hand and directly into the mirror's hazy surface. Buzz! A subtle ripple spread across the surface, and the Mirror of Judgment slowly became clearer, though its surface remained incredibly deep and mysterious, like the night sky. Chen inhaled deeply, his palm opened. The mysterious page of immortality shimmered into existence. He flicked his finger, and the page of immortality floated out, finally hovering in front of the Mirror of Judgment. Buzz! The mirror rippled again, and suddenly, streams of light swirled around, transforming into a beam of light that enveloped the page of immortality. Sizzle! The light intensified, and the Mirror of Judgment began to violently tremble. This scene made both Chen and the 9 nether feel tense. The Immortal tome was indeed terrifying. Even with a page of immortality acting as a guide, it was still enough to almost cause the Mirror of Judgment to spiral out of control. Their gazes were fixed intently on the mirror's surface, but even after several minutes, it remained completely dark. This situation caused Chen's brow to furrow deeply. Is the Immortal tome really this powerful? Even the Mirror of Judgment can't detect its traces. 9 nether sighed, truly amazed by the legendary primordial law body. Chen didn't speak. His eyes remained fixed, not blinking once. Minutes passed, and Chen's disappointment grew stronger. 9 nether could only gently pat his shoulder in a gesture of comfort. But just as Chen and 9 nether were about to give up, the still, silent mirror surface suddenly rippled violently. The dark mirror began to show faint, blurry images. Chen and 9 nether's expressions changed, their eyes sparkling with wild joy.